horrifying and fascinating medical cases. Did you know there was a doctor who used his own patients as lab experiments, and most of them never survived? Medicine is one of humanity's greatest achievements, a field dedicated to understanding life, alleviating suffering, and preserving dignity. Yet, woven into that narrative are episodes of profound ethical betrayal. In these stories, doctors and researchers abandon the fundamental principles of care, informed consent, and respect for life. What begins with scientific ambition or institutional ambition can spiral into tragedy, sometimes on a global scale. Behind each name lies not only a scandal, but lessons about human rights, racism, dehumanization, and the fragile balance between progress and cruelty. In the early 2010s, Dr. Paolo Macchiarini, an Italian thoracic surgeon, was celebrated internationally for pioneering what was heralded as revolutionary regenerative medicine, the transplantation of synthetic tracheas seeded with a patient's own stem cells. Working at Sweden's prestigious Karolinska University Hospital and affiliated with the Karolinska Institute, the man once touted as a visionary soon became the focal point of one of modern medicine's biggest scandals. An external investigation later concluded that Macchiarini's published research exaggerated the success of these surgeries, downplayed complications, and made unsupported claims about outcomes without adequate evidence or ethical transparency. Several of his scientific papers were eventually retracted. Critics, including fellow surgeons and bioethicists, argued that the procedures should have been classified as research requiring formal ethical review rather than as standard medical care approval that likely would never have been granted given the risks and lack of prior verification. By 2016, the Karolinska Institute had severed ties with Macchiarini amid mounting evidence of research misconduct. A criminal case in Sweden later concluded that his actions constituted gross negligence, and in 2023, a Swedish court sentenced him to 30 months in prison for aggravated assault related to one of the operations. The Macchiarini saga is not simply a cautionary tale of one surgeon's hubris. It exposes systemic failures, institutional desire for prestige, inadequate oversight of cutting-edge procedures, and a medical culture that allowed promising theory to override patient safety. It also shows how fragile ethical boundaries can be when science experiments with human lives. These procedures, often numbering a dozen or more on a single patient, occurred in a context where enslaved individuals had no agency. They were not asked for informed consent, and they could not refuse. While Sims later used anesthesia when operating on white patients, his earlier experiments left many women traumatized, and without the protections we now consider fundamental in any clinical setting. Today, historians and ethicists recognize that Sims's methods, oppressive and exploitative by modern standards, exploited extreme racial and gender inequalities. Monuments to Sims have been removed or recontextualized in recent years, and his legacy remains deeply controversial, an enduring reminder of how medical progress can be built on the suffering of the vulnerable. One of the most notorious and ethically egregious episodes in American medical history unfolded over 40 years in rural Alabama, the Tuskegee syphilis study. Beginning in 1932, physicians from the U.S. Public Health Service, joined by the Tuskegee Institute, enrolled 600 impoverished African American men under the guise of receiving free health care. In truth, researchers sought to document the natural progression of untreated syphilis without ever telling the participants they had the disease. The study did not end until 1972, after it was exposed by whistleblower Peter Buxton, and news reports sparked national outrage. By then, only 74 of the original 399 infected men were alive, and many others had died of syphilis or related complications. Their spouses and children also suffered from secondary infections and congenital syphilis. The scandal led to a formal presidential apology in 1997, changes in research ethics regulations, and the requirement that all human subjects research in the United States require informed consent and institutional oversight. While Tuskegee exploited the vulnerable under the banner of research, perhaps no figure in medical history represents the darkest transformation of a healer into a harm doer more than Dr. Josef Mengele, a Nazi physician at Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. Known to prisoners as the Angel of Death, Mengele was both a physician and an SS officer who participated in the selection of prisoners for execution and conducted appalling medical experiments on inmates. The Nazi regime's medical personnel, including Mengele and others, operated outside any ethical constraints, viewing prisoners as expendable subjects to further ideological aims. After the war, Mengele fled Europe and eluded capture for decades, dying in Brazil in 1979. His crimes, along with those of other Nazi medical officers, helped spur the development of the Nuremberg Code, a pivotal set of ethical guidelines for human experimentation emphasizing voluntary consent and minimizing harm. In the same era, across the globe, another brutal human experimentation program operated under the aegis of state power. Unit 731, a covert biological and chemical warfare research unit of the Imperial Japanese Army, conducted systematic atrocities in Harbin, China, and other locations between the late 1930s and 1945. Ostensibly part of a disease prevention department, Unit 731's physicians and scientists performed experiments on prisoners, often Chinese civilians, and prisoners of war, designed to test biological weapons, infectious agents, and the limits of human tolerance. Subjects were deliberately infected with plague, cholera, and other lethal pathogens to observe disease progression. Others were exposed to frostbite, vivisection without anesthesia, and weapons testing where bombs were detonated near human targets. Some prisoners were used to test poisons, syphilis infection experiments, and surgical procedures without pain relief. The unit's staff referred to human subjects as Maruta, a term that revealed the dehumanization underlying their work. The legacy of Unit 731 remains controversial, particularly in East Asia, where its horrors are still a subject of political tension and historical reflection. Its methods and motivations stand among the gravest violations of medical ethics in history. These 5 cases, spanning continents and decades, are not isolated tales of rogue actors. They reveal how context, institutional ambition, racial prejudice, wartime ideology, scientific ambition, and systemic neglect can distort medical authority into something profoundly harmful. Each instance points to a failure of oversight, accountability, and the basic respect for human dignity. From synthetic transplants gone tragically wrong to racially biased long-term medical misery, from pseudo-scientific racial experiments to wartime atrocities, these stories have influenced modern ethical standards. The ethical frameworks governing human research today inform consent, institutional review boards, transparent reporting, and accountability emerged partly as responses to these abuses. While science has brought immense benefits, these episodes remind us that ethical vigilance must accompany every advance, and that the horrors of the past should guide our commitment to human rights, dignity, and compassion in medicine. If you want more shocking, real-life stories from the dark side of medicine, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't believe what's coming next.